and pains and traumas and hurts and betrayals, but then some of it's not even rational. 10 years later, every Saturday night, I sit in my office with excruciating pain because whatever reason, all my childhood abandonment issues build up, and I'm like, tomorrow is Sunday, and tomorrow is the day where everybody I love has decided they hate me. And I have no reason to believe that. There's hundreds and hundreds of you here every week to worship Jesus with one another, with me, and with my family. And so then, even though my emotions are lying to me, and even though I feel overwhelmed, and even though I don't know how this ends, I will not fear, for my shepherd is with me. And maybe that's where some of you are at today. Maybe your valley isn't church planting, but maybe it is, and some of you need to step up to the plate because we got churches to plant in other cities, and all God's people said, amen. And the one who's hiding right now, you might be the one who's being called right now. But maybe that's not your valley. Maybe your valley is your marriage feels like it's falling apart. And even though you feel like that, you're going to show up. Or maybe it's a diagnosis that you don't like and haven't shared with anybody yet. And even though you will still trust your shepherd. Or maybe even though your faith is hanging on by a thread, you need to remember that the faith of a mustard seed is all God requires to move a mountain from one place to another. Amen. Maybe it's the ache of praying for someone you love and see nothing changing. But even though you don't see it yet, you will not stop praying because the Lord is your shepherd. I need you to hear this. The valley does not mean God left you. The valley often means God is leading you. Because in the same way that a shepherd cannot take a sheep directly up the mountain because they can't handle the climb, the same way God takes you through winding roads that feel less comfortable, but it's the only way you could survive the perilous journey. You need to understand that often, the valley is proof that he's leading you to new green pastures. And he takes us the winding paths through the valleys because that's the correct path to the good place that you want him to take you. And so if the road is difficult right now, it might be because God is saying yes to your request to take you someplace good. So often we struggle to trust and love and honor God in the journey because we have the audacity to demand that he lets us live our lives from one mountaintop experience to the next mountaintop experience and skip the journeys up and down in between. But you need to please hear and tattoo these words on your heart today, that the path to the greenest pastures almost always runs through the darkest valleys. And Jesus is just saying, trust me, the valley is not the detour. It's the way to the place that you want me to take you. And so David says, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Not even if, someday maybe, but probably not. He says, even though. Even though. And then he says something really powerful. He says, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. That's what he says. He says, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Last time I preached this message, I had a friend come and bring me some gifts and said, your rod, and your staff, they comfort me. And what happens is you probably recognize a shepherd's staff. See, the problem is sheep be sheepin'. And some of you might think I'm talking about animals. But sheep be sheepin'. Amen. And so what a shepherd does is they have a staff with a little do-do-do loop-de-loop over here on the end. That's the Greek word. Sorry, Hebrew. We'll be in Old Testament. And what happens is sheep don't see good, and sometimes sheep are dumb. And sometimes the shepherd is saying, sheep, that way. And little Susie, who jumps off the cliff, is like, bah, bet. And she goes this way. And so sometimes the shepherd needs to take his little staff, and he needs to grab her by the leg and say, Susie, we're going this way. Ricky, stop going off that cliff. We're going this way. And sometimes it's kind and gentle. And by the way, there's a reason that God called the leaders of his church pastors, which is a word for shepherd. Sometimes it's gentle, sometimes that's all you need, but sometimes God's saying, sheep, go this way. And you're like, bah, and you run and you go this way. And so sometimes it's like, get over here. Amen. And some of you still haven't understood that I'm not talking about animals right now. You're familiar with the staff, but what you're not always familiar with is the rod. Rod. See, what happens, the rod is something the shepherd would have. When predators try to come and harm the sheep. And what you need to understand about the rod of God, your shepherd, the rod of Jesus, the good shepherd, is this thing never fails to accomplish its purpose. See, Jesus doesn't have to pray, Lord, make my aim true. He just winds up his club, and whatever this club strikes will suffer instant defeat. And I got to be honest. Sometimes there's a very immature child inside of me that understands that I am here with my shepherd and his club, and sometimes I see an enemy coming on the horizon, and sometimes there's this immature child in me that just says, man, I wish they'd try it because I'd like to see what it looks like when he uses this thing. Sometimes I just want to yell at the enemy far away and say, hey, bring it on, big boy. And then I'm just going to hide behind my shepherd and say, you got this. You got this. You got this. Your staff and your rod, they comfort me. Here's the problem. Here's the problem. David is saying, I find comfort not just in your guidance, but in your protection. You guys hear me loud and clear? The problem is, and I believe this with all my heart, some of you right now, you need to start embracing that God doesn't just have a staff, he has a rod. Because here's the problem. I believe you will never see God defeat your enemies if you never face them. I believe that you will never experience God's miraculous deliverance if life is so good that you never need a miracle. I believe you will never know God's provision if you insist on being so self-sufficient. Can I tell you a really honest story? 3 times in my life, I have had somebody give Brittany and myself a gift in the form of a check that had 5 digits on it. One was $7,000, one was $10,000, one was $14,000. And at every single time when we got these big gifts, I'm waiting for the $20,000 because it looks like they're escalating. So just if anybody needs to know that. But what happened was we were always in a season where we were responsible. This is important. I'm not a prosperity gospel preacher, but we were responsibly outgiving our income. Did you hear me? Every time we got one of these gifts, we were responsibly outgiving our income. And nobody knew but us, but the Lord called somebody to come and bless us to provide some sort of relief. And I'm telling you, you will never experience God's provision if you insist on living a self-sufficient life that requires no provision from him. Am I preaching a message about generosity and giving right now? I'm talking about that's an illustration from my life that could apply to any other area of your life, financial or not. And here's the problem. Some of us will never see God swing the rod because we're too busy running from anything that looks like a fight. We're too busy, and I'm not talking about not loving your enemies. I'm not saying don't love your enemies. I'm talking about all of the things in life that you were meant to fight through and fight for, and you see them coming, and you run and flee to your life of comfort and convenience rather than standing your ground to fight, which doesn't mean you fight. It means you say, hey, shepherd, hey, big boy, why don't you grab that rod and do what I know you can? I'd like to see them try something. Because we run from the fight, some of us will never see God wield his rod for our protection. And I know somebody needs to hear that today. I know a lot of people need that today. Because some of us have built our whole lives around a safety and a comfort that we control, built for our own strength and built so that we do not live in reliance on our shepherd. But when you stand your ground and when you face what's coming against you, then you get to see what kind of shepherd you have. You see that he is not weak. You see that he is not passive. You see that he is not different. You see that he will wield that rod on your behalf and he will fight for you. And some of you have things that you need to start staring down right now and let him battle for you. Some of you are not fighting wolves and lions. You have anxiety that stalks you every morning and you need to let Jesus fight it for you. Some of you have an addiction that wants to devour you and you need to say, the Lord is my shepherd. Some of you have shame that whispers lies in your ear every moment of every day, and you need to let your shepherd shepherd you. Some of you have division in your home that will be destroyed when the Lord becomes the shepherd of both of you. Some of you have a temptation that's been circling you for years, and you need to say, the Lord is my shepherd, wield the rod and strike down my enemy. Because the shepherd that you have, he's not scared of any of it. He's not pacing the fence line hoping it goes away. He's standing between you and it with his rod. He's saying, I am your shepherd. And the next part of the passage takes us even farther, because he says, while this is all going on, he says, he prepares a place for me. He sets a table for me in the presence of my enemies. And in my experience is when somebody sets the table and puts a plate and pours a drink, the most polite thing to do is sit down and eat and enjoy it. Everything in this passage has such a deep meaning. So in David's time, hospitality was paramount. So what happened was, when you came under somebody's hospitality, your honor was at risk. If somebody came into your hospitality, you were responsible for their safety. And so if they come into your home and an enemy comes knocking on your door and says, let them out, or we're going to kill them and we're going to kill you, then what your job is to do is to do whatever it takes to keep them safe, even if you die in the process. And what Psalm 23 tells us is the Lord is our shepherd, but now the symbolism has shifted. You're no longer a sheep in a pasture. You're a person in the home of your host, and your enemies are coming after you, and you're in his house, and you know what he says to you? He says, hey, I got this table ready for you. I got this meal ready for you. Let me pour this drink for you. And those guys outside, sit down and eat. I'll be right back. Because he prepares a table in the presence of your enemies.